I didn't ruin my life with one bad decision. I ruined it by letting other people make them for me. At the time, it didn't feel like surrender. It felt like relief. I was tired of choosing. Tired of the constant pressure to know what I wanted, who I was becoming, where I was supposed to go next. Every choice felt like a test I hadn't studied for, and I was afraid that if I answered honestly, I would disappoint everyone who believed they already knew me. So when people offered opinions, I accepted them. When they suggested paths, I followed. When they told me this makes sense, I stopped asking whether it made me feel alive. I learned early that approval could substitute purpose at least for a while. I was praised for being reasonable. For being flexible. For being easy to work with, easy to live with, easy to guide. I mistook that ease for maturity. In reality, I was slowly dissolving into whatever shape fit best in the room I was in. The first big decision I didn't make myself seemed small at the time. A job opportunity that wasn't what I wanted, but was safe. Everyone agreed it was the smart move. So I nodded, signed the papers, and told myself passion could come later. Later became a pattern. Relationships followed the same logic. I didn't fall in love so much as I settled into it. I chose people who chose me first. People who were certain. Their certainty filled the space where my questions lived, and for a while, that felt comforting. I told myself love wasn't supposed to be dramatic. That calm was better than chaos. That wanting more was childish. The problem with that logic is that it works until it doesn't. Years passed like that. Quietly. Efficiently. I hit all the milestones people like to point at when they want to reassure themselves they're doing life correctly. From the outside, nothing was missing. From the inside, something fundamental was eroding. I didn't wake up miserable. I woke up neutral. Days weren't bad enough to escape, but never good enough to remember. I moved through routines like a ghost with responsibilities. I smiled at the right moments. I said the right things. I performed gratitude convincingly enough that even I started believing it. But late at night, when the house was silent and no one needed anything from me, a single question kept resurfacing. If you were alone, with no one watching, would you choose this? I never answered it. Instead, I got better at distraction. Work. Obligations. Small talk. Plans made months in advance so I wouldn't have to think about the present. I told myself this was adulthood, that everyone felt this way and simply didn't talk about it. Then one evening, something trivial broke the illusion. I was sitting at a dinner table, surrounded by familiar faces, listening to a conversation about plans I was supposedly excited about. Someone turned to me and asked, "You're okay with this, right?" It wasn't an accusation. It was said kindly. Casually. I opened my mouth to say yes, and nothing came out. The silence lasted maybe 2 seconds. Long enough for someone to laugh and move on, assuming my agreement. But inside me, something cracked. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Cleanly. In that moment, I realized I had no idea whether I was okay with it. Or with anything else in my life. I had outsourced so many decisions that I no longer trusted my own reactions. That terrified me. After that night, I started paying attention to how often I deferred. How frequently I waited for cues. How rarely I initiated anything that wasn't already expected of me. I had become fluent in adaptation and illiterate in desire. The scariest part wasn't that others influenced my life. It was that I had invited them to. Because if someone else was choosing, then failure wouldn't fully belong to me. I could always say it made sense at the time. That it was reasonable. That anyone would have done the same. I had built my entire identity around not being wrong. And in doing so, I had avoided being real. The first time I tried to really assert myself, it felt unnatural. I rehearsed the words in my head, convinced they would come out wrong. When I finally said no to something small, the room didn't collapse. No one yelled. No one left. They just looked surprised. That look stayed with me. It made me realize something painful: people weren't controlling my life because they wanted to. They were doing it because I had trained them to. By being agreeable. By being silent. By being grateful for paths I never chose. That night, alone, I felt something close to panic. If I stopped letting others decide, I would have to face the truth of what I'd avoided for years. I might not like what I wanted. And worse, I might already be too late to get it. Once I noticed it, I couldn't stop seeing it. How often I waited for approval before speaking. How my first instinct was always to ask what others thought, not what I felt. How every important moment in my life had been shaped by someone else's confidence filling the space where my own should have been. It wasn't that people were forcing me. That would have been easier. They were offering. And I was accepting every time. The realization didn't free me. It destabilized me. Because if my life wasn't something that had happened to me, then I had to face the more uncomfortable truth: I had actively participated in my own erasure. After that dinner, I started pulling away internally. Not physically, I still showed up, still fulfilled expectations, but mentally I was somewhere else, replaying conversations from years ago and noticing all the moments where I could have spoken up and didn't. I told myself I was being selfless, easygoing, mature. But selflessness without self is just absence. The pressure built slowly. A quiet tension behind my eyes. A sense that every decision I didn't make was piling up somewhere inside me, waiting. I began to feel irritated by questions that once felt harmless. What do you want? What do you think? Are you okay with this? They should have been simple. Instead, they felt like traps. Because answering honestly would disrupt the balance I had carefully maintained. It would mean admitting that I didn't know who I was anymore, and that terrified me. People depend on consistency. They build expectations around it. And I had become reliable by never contradicting them. The first real conflict came when a decision couldn't be postponed. It was big enough that my silence would be noticed. Something that would shape the next decade of my life. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone agreed on what made sense. And everyone assumed my answer before I gave it. I felt cornered. For days, I barely slept. I imagined both futures in detail. The one everyone wanted for me looked stable, respectable, predictable. The other was uncertain, risky, poorly defined, but it was the first time in years that imagining a future didn't make my chest tighten. That should have been enough. It wasn't. Because choosing myself meant accepting consequences I had avoided my entire life. Disappointing people. Being misunderstood. Possibly failing publicly, without the shield of it seemed like the right thing at the time. I realized something then that shook me. I wasn't afraid of making the wrong choice. I was afraid of making a choice that was undeniably mine. That fear came from somewhere deep. From years of learning that approval equaled safety. That conflict threatened connection. That being wanted required being agreeable. So when the moment came, I did what I had always done. I hesitated. And in that hesitation, someone else stepped in. Gently. Confidently. They explained why the obvious option was best, why hesitation was just anxiety, why I'd thank them later. I nodded. The relief was immediate and poisonous. The tension drained from my body, replaced by something colder. A quiet resignation. I told myself it was done. That the choice had been made. That I could stop thinking now. That night, I broke down for the first time in years. Not loudly. No tears. Just a hollow collapse inward. I sat on the floor, staring at nothing, feeling the weight of something irreversible settle into place. I had crossed a line. Not because of the decision itself but because I recognized the pattern repeating, fully aware this time, and still didn't stop it. That's when the guilt turned into something else. Regret isn't loud at first. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It asks questions you can't unhear. How many times can you do this before there's nothing left to choose? At what point does flexibility become self-betrayal? Who will you be when everyone else is gone? I started resenting the people I had given power to. Then I hated myself for that resentment, because it wasn't fair. They hadn't taken anything I didn't offer. I had built my cage myself out of politeness, fear, and good intentions. Days went by. Weeks. Outwardly, nothing changed. Inwardly, everything was unraveling. I felt disconnected from my own voice. Conversations felt scripted. I caught myself agreeing automatically, even when my body reacted with tension. One afternoon, standing alone, I tried to imagine my life 10 years ahead. And for the first time, the image scared me. Not because it was bad but because it was complete without me in it. I was present, but irrelevant. A character fulfilling a role rather than living a life. That was the moment I understood the ethical dilemma I had been avoiding. Continuing like this was kind. It was reasonable. It hurt no one immediately. Except me. And choosing myself now would hurt others at least temporarily. I had always believed that the moral choice was the one that caused the least disruption. But standing there, feeling myself slowly disappear, I questioned that belief for the first time. What if avoiding conflict isn't moral, just comfortable? What if silence is a form of dishonesty? What if letting others decide is a way of escaping responsibility for my own existence? That question followed me everywhere. And it led me to the most terrifying realization of all. If I didn't stop this now, there would come a day when choosing myself wouldn't even be an option anymore. The moment didn't arrive with drama. No shouting. No slammed doors. No sudden courage rising in my chest like in the stories people tell afterward. It came quietly, disguised as exhaustion. I woke up one morning with a strange clarity. Not hope. Not motivation. Just the absence of resistance. The kind that comes when you're too tired to keep pretending that postponement is neutrality. I understood something then. If I kept letting life happen to me, I wouldn't be spared from pain. I would just delay it and multiply it. That day, I said no. Not eloquently. Not bravely. My voice shook, and my explanation was incomplete. I didn't have a manifesto, just a boundary. And the moment the word left my mouth, I felt it, the rupture. Disappointment has a sound. It's quiet. Tight. Controlled. The room didn't explode, but something fundamental shifted. The version of me people had relied on, the agreeable one, the flexible one, the whatever works person, cracked in front of them. And they didn't like it. That was the hardest part. Not the anger. Not the confusion. The subtle withdrawal of approval. I had built my entire sense of worth on being easy to accept. The moment I stopped performing that role, I saw how conditional that acceptance had always been. Not maliciously. Just humanly. People adjust their affection to the version of you that causes them the least friction. The days that followed were brutal. I questioned everything. Whether I had exaggerated my dissatisfaction. Whether I was being selfish. Whether I had destroyed something stable in exchange for uncertainty I romanticized. Regret tried to pull me back into old habits. Apologize. Explain better, compromise. I almost did. But something stopped me, a quiet awareness that if I reversed course now, I would confirm the lie I'd lived by for years, that my instincts couldn't be trusted. So I stayed uncomfortable. I let conversations end awkwardly. I let misunderstandings exist without correcting them. I let people sit with a version of me that didn't immediately adapt to their expectations. It was lonely in a way I hadn't prepared for. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being seen inaccurately and not fixing it. Over time, something unexpected happened. The noise in my head softened. Without constantly scanning for cues, without adjusting myself in real time, I began to notice small, quiet preferences. Not passions. Not grand dreams. Just honest reactions. I liked this more than that. I didn't enjoy this anymore. I wanted time without justification. It felt insignificant and revolutionary. I realized I had spent years waiting for permission to exist fully, not understanding that permission was the one thing no one could give me. Some relationships didn't survive the change. That grief still sits with me. I don't pretend otherwise. Growth costs something. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling comfort, not truth. But the relationships that remain, the ones that adjusted rather than resisted, felt different. Less polished. More real. Built on friction instead of silence. And I changed, too. I stopped asking what made sense and started asking what felt aligned. I learned that alignment isn't always pleasant. Sometimes it feels like tension. Like standing in your own outline for the first time. I want to tell you I found happiness. That's not how this ends. What I found was authorship. The understanding that even uncertainty feels different when it's chosen. That regret hurts less when it belongs to you. That a life shaped by your own imperfect decisions is still more honest than one lived on borrowed certainty. There are days I still hesitate. Still feel the pull to defer, to disappear into agreement, to let someone else take the wheel. But now, when that impulse appears, I recognize it. It's not kindness. It's fear. And fear doesn't get to decide my life anymore. I didn't take my life back in one moment. I took it back every time I chose to stay present instead of convenient. Every time I let discomfort speak louder than approval. Every time I allowed myself to be misunderstood rather than unreal. That's the quiet truth no one warns you about. You don't lose yourself all at once. And you don't find yourself all at once either. You reclaim yourself in pieces the same way you gave yourself away. And if you're listening to this wondering whether it's too late to choose differently, here's what I learned the hard way: the moment you realize your life isn't yours yet is the earliest possible moment to begin.